Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome to Coffee and Conversations. I am Leah Lawrence, the Business Development Associate for Superior Clinical Research, and I am so glad to have you here with us today. At Superior, as you all know, we believe research should feel human, and that's exactly why these conversations are about slowing down, listening, and learning from people who spent their careers building trust in healthcare, especially in communities that are so often left out. So I invite each and every single one of you to grab your coffee, grab your tea, and whatever else it is that you're sipping on, and join us for a conversation that I hope will be immensely helpful, and it's going to be honest and thoughtful and very, very real. And that is why I am truly honored to introduce today's guest. Dr. Sharon Harrell is a dentist, public health professional, educator, and nationally respected advocate for health equity and clinical research education. She is the owner of One Way Forward, a community educator and review panelist with CISCRIP, and formerly served as dental director and chief diversity officer at First Health of the Carolinas. Woo! Yes, I said it before. You go, girl. Yes, yes, yes. But what makes Dr. Sharon very special isn't just her extensive resume, it's her ability to connect science with trust and systems with people. So, Dr. Sharon, thank you so much for being here today. How are you?
I'm doing great, and it's wonderful to be with you, Leah. Just wonderful.
Thank you. All right, let's kick it off. All right.
Okay.
So let's start all the way back at the beginning. So you started as a chemistry major, which already hats off to you. I took chemistry one semester, and nope. So yes, woman. And you chose dentistry. What drew you to a profession that sits at the intersection of science, trust, and human connection?
Well, first of all, Leah, I would agree with you that dentistry is the perfect connection between science, trust, and human connection.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's going to sound like a cliche, but I chose dentistry in order to help people. And I wanted not only just to help people, but I wanted to help people who had not had some of the same advantages or opportunities as others. So I decided to go into public health dentistry. I decided that I think I was a senior in undergrad. And what made me decide to go that route is I was at the bus stop, and this was back in the days when the bus schedule was not electronic. You didn't find it on your phone or the internet. It was
Mm-hmm.
actually on a pole, and the writing of the bus schedule would be kind of wrapped around the pole. It was almost like a maze. And I remember a very shabbily dressed person coming up to the bus stop and trying so hard to figure out that schedule. And I just decided right then, this is the type of person I want to be able to help people who haven't had the same advantages as others. So it has been such a fulfilling career for me, advocating for and providing dental care to underserved children.
Yes. Amen. I remember when I used to have to catch the bus back in Philly, and we have SEPTA down there, and the whole city runs on SEPTA. And before it became electronic, I remember those long things like you knew that bus was coming at 10:55, and then another one was coming at
Right, right.
11:20, and it would be sometimes it would be the same people each morning because I'd have to catch the bus to school. Like you knew those same people, and we kind of formed a little bit of a community. And
Right.
we sometimes they will help each other out. So I remember this one lady, me and my friends was running for the bus, and she literally stood in between. It was like, wait, the kids coming, they coming. So that connection that you mentioned and that wanting to, help people who didn't really come from the same background, I completely understand it. And it really shows up in the patient experience and the participant experience, I feel like, because everyone or a lot of us have those stories or at least something similar of those connections. Now, dental visits can be deeply personal, as I can say, as a person who had a sweet tooth and spent a majority of my childhood in the dentist chair to my mother's shame. And they can also sometimes be intimidating. what has that taught you about communicating with people who are off the bat going to be nervous and skeptical and unsure? And how does that translate to clinical research participation?
So, Leah, one of the most fulfilling experiences I had as when I was practicing as a dentist was being because I work with children birth to 21. I loved it. But one of the most fulfilling parts of my time in dentistry was being able to transform a child who was initially very nervous and apprehensive into a child who didn't mind coming to the dentist, one who would actually come skipping in. And I know you can't believe someone would come skipping in,
No,
but
no, I can't. I see them. I see them. I was just always a kid pouting, but I would see them. I was just like, "They lucky. They just getting the cleaning. Like I'm gonna go in the back. I'm just
right,
like drilling."
right. But when you're communicating with people who are nervous, whether it's in dentistry or clinical research, the biggest lesson I learned is that you have to take your time. And we
Mhm,
all know that in healthcare, when you take your time, that can be a challenge because if you take additional time with one patient or research clinical participant, then that means you're probably likely going to run behind and then your other patients are going to be disgruntled. But the only way to have true communication is to take time to talk to patients, and that relates to clinical research participation as well. And I know I've heard either you say or one of your colleagues at Superior Clinical Research say that the first conversation you have with someone is not necessarily when the patient or person decides they're going to participate. That you continually are talking to them and taking time to answer their questions. So
mhm.
taking time, whether it's in dentistry or clinical research, taking time to walk the patient through and hold their hand is something that's very necessary and key. And I'll say one other thing, and that is when we're taking our time with the patient, because we're so familiar with what we talk about, many times we sometimes talk fast. And when we talk fast, we have to slow down a little bit, not only slow down and take time with the patient, but also slow down when we're talking so that the patient has a little time to actually process what we're saying. So the bottom line
Mhm.
is to take our time with communicating with patients that are skeptical or nervous, whether they're in the dental chair or whether they're in the clinical research room.
Yes, yes. And once, because sometimes that fear often does tie directly to access.
Mhm.
And since you've worked extensively in the public health and in children's oral health access, because you've done this from birth to 21, what parallels do you see between access to dental care and access to clinical research, especially for rural or undeserved communities?
Well, the parallel I see in both access for dental care for underserved communities as well as in clinical research is that you have to be innovative. So, the status quo or the way things are normally done is that the patient comes to us. Innovation, in my mind, means that you go to the patient. So, what do I mean by that? In public health, we learn over and over again that the community is the patient. So, one of the innovative ways we reach underserved kids was taking the care to their community. And what is the kids' community? The school. So, through grants from we had the Duke Endowment Grant, Kate B. Reynolds Charitable Trust Grant, as well as the Foundation of First Health, we were grant Foundation of First Health, we were able to establish two school-based dental centers on the campus of middle schools in a rural county in North Carolina, right next to the school-based health centers. And so we actually were able to take the care to the patient's community, which was a school. And what that did is it meant that kids had access to care, they missed minimal time at school, and their parents didn't have to miss work. Well, there's one other example of innovation of taking the care to the patients that to me has been the most impactful way of being innovative in the 39 years that I've been in dentistry. And that is through our portable dental program, where the staff would take dental chairs, a sterilizer, x ray machine, roll all of that equipment into a school, set it up in the gym or the science room or the art room to
Mhm.
take care of patients. So the parallels I see are that you have to have innovation. And I can tell that Superior Clinical Research has that innovation of going to the patient, because you are you're set up where the patients are. And
Mm-hmm.
have um, I have seen and heard you talk about all of the outreach events you do that are in the community, so that that's innovative, because the status quo is for everyone to go outside the community, but you're actually providing access to people right where they can learn, get treatment, get education right in their community. And one other thing I'll say is, as I'm delving into this new world of clinical research, I'm learning about decentralized trials where you
Mm-hmm.
could have, for example, your blood work done right in your local area. And I am looking right now into participating in a study. And I'll say that one of the big decision makers for me was the fact that I would be able to get the blood work done locally. So
Mm-hmm.
taking the education and research to where the patients live, work, and play, to me, is innovative, whether it's public health dentistry or whether it's clinical research.
Yes. And you know what? I always think it's funny when people say you have to be innovative, you have to be innovative. When I think of that, and when I think of it, it's just on brand. That's public health, being there and giving health resources to the public right there. And if that means you're right there in the school, then you're right there in the school. And, some people, that's just on brand. And then the same thing with superior clinical research is just like, normal everyone, typically you're 9 to 5, then after that you got to worry about sometimes who's going to feed the kid or who's going to feed or walk your dog or things that necessary and certain life things. So of course we have extended hours. Of course we have availability on the weekends, or we work with the participant because we need them as much as we want them to need us. So you have to,
Absolutely.
in order to get them to where you would like for them to be, you have to meet them where they are each and every single time. And that's just
Agree.
the on brand. But also, I wish I had a dentist school in my middle school. When I tell you, Dr. Sharon, my mama was mad at me. And mainly because our so my first dentist in the when I started this, I think I started mine in like elementary school. My problem of just eating after hours, mostly chocolates and ice creams and sweets that I wasn't supposed to eat. It was like a really, really sterile place. I didn't like it. It wasn't really welcoming. And so she was like, I prefer, and plus it was too costly, because it was downtown and my mom worked downtown. So she's like, now we have to go someplace far out. And we say inner city Philadelphia. And it was like kind of like Roxborough, Pennsylvania or somewhere. It was like kind of outside. And it would take about 45 minutes without traffic to get there, but you could tell it was the one spot that so many families went to, all because it would be people coming from near, from far. I'd see a few people from school and they lived way further deep in the city than me, all at this one place. And my mom would just be so irritated and mad that we would have to travel so far, and there's just all these kids in the waiting room. But if we had that, well, I know she'd still probably be mad the fact that tennis, but I just know it would have just helped her and relieved so much stress. And, just that access just would have been so nice. So the fact that you guys do that and are still doing that is just amazing. And it really, really does help the community, because once you do have that access, communication is critical. You're able to really help and be of service and communicate with the people that you need to and help the people that we need to. Okay, I'm gonna get off my soapbox. Okay.
You're good. You're good, Leah.
In dentistry, informed consent isn't just a form, it's a conversation. So, what lessons can research teams learn from how dentists explain complex procedures in everyday language, especially because I've had quite a few. Like I said, they took me in the back for drilling, and each and every single time, like my anxiety would go like they would literally try to put me in a straitjacket, because if any needles, any drills, anything, I was running. So I'm pretty sure you've had your wealth of experience dealing with participants and patients like that. What are some lessons and things of that nature that we could definitely learn from you guys?
So what you can learn from us is, the first lesson is to avoid what I call industry words.
Hmm.
Once the dentist or the principal investigator or the clinical research coordinator uses a word that the patient or parent doesn't understand or the child doesn't understand, you have lost them, because they are focusing so much on what was that word, what did that mean, that they really don't hear anything else you say. So until you explain to them what a principal investigator is, what generalization is, what randomized clinical trials are, then they're lost. So in dentistry, I could say to the parent, well, I'm planning to do a composite on tooth number 14 in the upper left quadrant. That means nothing to the patient. To the parent, I have to say, I'm going to be doing a white filling on a molar on your child's upper left part of their face. So avoid industry words. The second thing I would say is I learned to stop asking the parent when I was talking to them about the work I was doing or the work I'd already done. I learned to stop asking them, do you understand? Because even if a parent or patient, even if they don't understand, they're usually going to say, nod their heads like, yes, I understand, because they're embarrassed to acknowledge that they don't understand. And so what I started asking was, did I explain that in a clear way? Or would you like me to go over that again? Or could you perhaps repeat that or share with me how that fell on, how I explained that or how you understand that, what I said. And that way, the onus is on me, the communicator, and not on the patient.
Yes, yes, yes. That definitely, that makes sense once you think about it. And it's not that critical. It's straight to the point. Like, just, no, don't. Sometimes asking the question automatically just kind of gets you away from the answer that you would want anyway, because it puts them in that hot seat.
Exactly.
Okay. And you've also spent years teaching others how to communicate. So, as an educator and an adjunct professor, you spent years teaching and mentoring. From your experience, what actually makes information stick? Like, what causes people to disengage?
So the first thing that makes information stick and that keeps people from disengaging is that they understand that you really love your topic. Like I can tell you really love what you do. So that's going to engage the audience or your students or whoever you're teaching right away.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is that you have to show that you sincerely care about what they will gain from what you're sharing. Theodore Roosevelt had a quote. I love quotes. Anybody that knows me knows that I love quotes.
I
And
love them
do
too.
you, Leah? Do you, Leah?
Yes, I have so many in my phone. I just go about the day saving.
Well, Theodore Roosevelt's quote, at least it's been attributed to him, I think he is the actual author, is that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's the case anytime that you're sharing information. And so the second way I would say that you can help information stick and keep your audience engaged is to ask, how does your audience process information? And believe it or not, that concept has a lot to do with equity, because learners and listeners have different learning and listening styles.
Mm-hmm.
Making your information equitable means that you're sharing it in a way that everyone has the opportunity to learn, because some learners, they learn by lecture, some learn by hands-on like me, some like to look at videos, which I like to look at videos too, some like to interact, some like to have a little time to reflect.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that in conclusion, try to remember what is sort of like the tenet or the philosophy of all teachers, which is that know your audience. In other words, know who you're talking to. And as you said earlier, meet people where they are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, I have a quote, and it's not mine. It was my dad's, and I mentioned to Dr. Sharon earlier, and I mentioned on the channel before, my dad's a pastor. And so he does public speaking like literally every Sunday. And so one time I asked him, like, how do you know like when and how long to do a message? And then his quote was, the mind can only absorb what the butt can endure. You can't keep people for forever and just keep talking to them and expect them, like at some point they are going to shut off.
That's true. That's true. I'll have to add that quote to my list, Leah.
Because the disengagement isn't always the individual. Sometimes it's just you kept me too long, or
Exactly.
sometimes it's systemic. So you have also served as a C-suite chief diversity officer and health system leader. So where do healthcare systems unintentionally create barriers that discourage participation without realizing it?
So this one was a little um, a harder question, Leah, because we often focus on the barriers that the patient has, such as transportation or finances or being able to get off from work. But there are some barriers that healthcare systems create that are unintentional. It depends on the health system, but sometimes the hours of operation, we talked about that, can be a barrier. Um, Though necessary, I would say that the sheer length of some of the consent forms that are used in research studies can be a deterrent. I was visiting one clinical research site, and the informed consent form was about 27 pages, and I'm sure that many people who are listening today have seen them even longer than that. Another systemic barrier is that many doctors don't routinely mention clinical trials to their patients. In
Mhm.
fact, there was a survey, Research America did a survey in conjunction with the Association of Clinical Research Organizations. I'm learning all of these now, ACRA, I think it's called, that revealed that 87% of respondents felt that, or they agreed that healthcare professionals should discuss clinical trials as a standard of care anytime a patient is diagnosed with any disease or condition. The other thing I would say that could be a systemic barrier is tending to hold community conversations only in the flagship rather than going to other parts of the community where people reside. And then, even worse than that, or equally worse, is probably going just once, doing a one and done and not going back. So, failing to go where people live and work on a consistent basis could be another unintentional barrier to participation without the system realizing that.
And all of those are really, because I remember when I used to work at the bank, and sometimes I would have to do credit card applications. And they would always encourage us to say, oh, it'll take less than 5 minutes, knowing that it does not. It does not. If you think the 20 pages, those would be like 50 pages of just percentages, annual, year rates, and all this other stuff. Do you consent? Dot 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 dot. And that does discourage people. And you would literally see them like moving around in their seat, just ready to get up and go. I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to do this. I'm immediately regretting it. And yeah, just
Right.
the mind can only absorb what the
Agree. I agree 100% with you, Leah.
and I really do believe that that's where cultural humility really comes in. Sometimes we have to just be a little bit more human and aware of these things. And as a certified diversity executive, what does cultural humility look like in real life when asking someone to trust a clinical study?
So first of all, Leah, I would like to define cultural humility because for years I confused it with cultural competency.
Mm.
So if you don't mind, I'm actually going to read the definition of cultural humility.
Yes, ma'am.
It's defined as a lifelong process of self reflection, acknowledging one's own biases, and learning from others. And for completeness' sake, I like to also give the definition of cultural competency, which is defined as the knowledge and skills to work effectively across cultures. And then the definition goes on to say that cultural competency focuses on external knowledge, which is what you learn from others, whereas cultural humility centers on internal awareness, like you just mentioned, Leah, understanding your own cultural lens and limitations. And I have to give a shout out to my colleagues, Sandra Washington and Dr. Eleanor Fleming, because they have helped me with these concepts through their talks and lectures. And in my chief diversity officer role, I actually focus more on cultural competency than cultural humility because I was trying to help physicians and other healthcare professionals to educate them on cultural norms. So I think cultural competency is a huge part of our interaction because we have to know about others' norms and cultural beliefs. But I do see cultural humility as the game changer when you're asking someone to trust a clinical study. So you asked me, what does cultural humility look like in real life when asking someone to trust a clinical study? And to me, what it looks like is removing judgment. And like you said, um, being cultural humility forces us to face, as you said, our unconscious biases so that there's nothing internal. I can honestly assess whether there's anything internal with me that's affecting my interaction or hindering my interaction with the patient. And one of the things I learned quickly as a certified diversity executive and as a chief diversity officer is that everybody has their own story. And
Mhm.
what I found time and time again is that what I thought was your story is not your story. When you start talking, it's completely different from what I thought. So if we apply that to cultural humility, I think what it means is that there may be factors influencing the patient's lack of trust that's not even on our radar screen. So we have to be open to listening to that patient's story, whether we fully understand it, and even whether we agree or not. But being open, cultural humility means that we're being open to listening to our patients and participants' stories in a non-judgmental way.
And that's what I was about to say. Would you also say that it also means not putting our own personal feelings or thoughts, our own preconceived notions on them as well?
You've nailed it, Leah. You've nailed it. And it's an ongoing, lifelong, as it said in the definition, it's a lifelong process.
It is. It is. It is. And sometimes you fall short. Sometimes I do myself. Sometimes we all do.
Yes, definitely. I
Okay.
admit that I do.
So you also work closely with communities through SysScript. And through your work with SysScript, what common gaps do you see in how clinical research is communicated to communities? I know you've already talked about it briefly a little bit before.
So, first of all, I'd like to share what SysScript stands for. It
Yes,
stands
ma'am.
for the Center for the Information and Study on Clinical Research Participation, and
Mhm.
it's a 501c3 nonprofit located in Boston, Massachusetts, and the mission is to educate and engage the public about clinical research participation. So to answer your question, you asked what common gaps do I see in how clinical research is communicated to communities? Well, I don't see a gap so much in how clinical research is communicated to communities. What I see, the gap that I see is that there is not much communication at all to communities about clinical research. It's not the how it's communicated, it's if it's even communicated. And
Mhm.
so SysScript, as well as Superior Clinical Research LLC, is working diligently to close that gap, both for the community at large as well as for those communities that have not been appropriately represented in clinical trials. And one of the many ways that SysScript has been touching different aspects of the community is through the Journey to Better Health mobile exhibit, of which I was honored to be a part of when it came here to North Carolina in October of last year. Have to give a great shout out to Stephanie Stenen at Bristol Myers Squibb, they were a platinum sponsor, and Justine Holloran of SysScript, and they made it happen. We went to 4 locations. We went to a mobile exhibit that was in partnership with the local health care system and a church. We went to a tribal nation. We went to a senior center, and we went to a festival. And I am happy to say that we had more attendees in that 4 days that the exhibit was in North Carolina than the exhibit had in their different visits to northeastern cities, which were larger than Fayetteville. They came to Fayetteville, North Carolina. And so I enjoy being a part of that because I got to talk with the patients one on one. They weren't patients; they were people in the public that we were educating. So I got to talk with them one on one about what clinical trials are about and to answer their questions. And one of the things I really liked is that there were measurable outcomes because the attendees, they took a pre-survey and a
Mhm.
post-survey, which showed that they had an increase in their knowledge and they also had an increase in their willingness to participate in clinical trials. So we'll say one more plug for CIS Group. They have a wonderful website that shows, it has easy to understand brochures. We talked about videos. It has videos. In fact, I'm honored to serve as one of their review panelists, which means that I help to evaluate their communications for clarity and readability. And they even provide help to people who are searching for trials. If you put in a certain amount of information, they'll actually be able to provide trials for you about your condition that are closer to you. So I can't say enough good things about my friends at CISCRIP or my friends at Superior Clinical Research LLC.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. Y'all go look up both. Y'all go look up both.
That's right.
But that disconnect you were talking about, oh my gosh, it's gets me every time. But and it gets me because one, I, not to say I didn't know anything about clinical research, but I say all the time I really wasn't that well versed in it. I just thought that just always happened in other areas that would never come to mind. And the only reason why I was introduced to it was because my high school roommate, who also works for my college roommate who works for Superior Clinical Research, and she would just teach me things along the way. And then I, go on forth and spread that message on to my family. And usually that's all it takes, is just that one person. But that disconnect that you were talking about, it reminds me often of how oral health is treated. Oral health is often separated from overall health conversations. Like
Yes.
growing up, it's just brush your teeth. And like that's really all, brush your teeth and floss. How does that disconnect mirror what happens in clinical research when certain populations are just left out of the narrative, and it's just like that one little thing? Oh, they're just this. You just do this with them, and then that's it.
So what happens in both of those situations is that you miss the whole picture. And I must say that in the field of dentistry, we are still battling, trying to add the mouth back to the body. But when oral health is separated from overall health, you miss how oral health contributes to overall health, such as the fact that if you have gum disease or you have poor oral health, pardon me, then it increases your chances of stroke, increases your chances of heart disease, worsens your diabetes control, increases your chances of having a low birth weight baby. So you miss the opportunity for whole person care. So likewise, in clinical research, you again miss the whole picture if you don't include certain populations, because you miss the opportunity for generalization, which basically means the ability to apply the research findings to the overall population. So in both cases, you miss the big picture. You miss the whole picture.
I didn't even know half of those points that you just mentioned. So, and something like that is just probably just so complex, and just so, when you're explaining something like that, respect really does matter. And from your perspective, what does respect look like when explaining something just of that nature? Like you could have a low control, like birth. I didn't even know that those things connected. And whether it's a dental procedure or a research protocol.
So respect looks like taking time, not rushing, explaining in terms the patient can understand, and helping the patient actually be safe enough to say, I don't understand a word you said. Sometimes the body language of a team member can rob the patient of respect. If the body language indicates that the team member's in a hurry, or they're frustrated, or they're disengaged, and it deters further questions, whether it's in dentistry or whether in clinical research, and then the patient doesn't feel respected. So I would say respect looks like everyone on the team making a commitment to be on board to engage fully with the patient.
Yes. Okay. Okay. And when respect is present, trust definitely does grow. Okay. And you've been a strong advocate for rural and undeserved representation in research. What is just one small practical change research sites could make to significantly improve their trust and participation? You talked so much already before about like several things I already feel like through this whole conversation, but can you just give us one more, please, Dr. Sharon?
So actually, it's funny because I'm going to actually give you three, but
Amen.
they'll be small, they'll be short. So we just talked about respect, making sure. So the first thing I would say is making sure the person who makes your first contact, whether it's in dentistry or clinical research, shows dignity and respect. And we keep talking about that, but that's so critical. That's the first step. Not everything builds off that first contact. And I've witnessed the first person I've come into contact, I witnessed this several times. I'm not saying in the healthcare system where I work, but just it can happen in any healthcare system. I have seen the first contact be cold. I've seen them be flippant. I have witnessed where the first contact will finish their conversation. I'm being real here. Finish their conversation with their coworker before I'm acknowledged, or they're on the phone but don't acknowledge that there's a person standing in front of them. And I wrote a LinkedIn post where I indicated the title of it was "It All Begins with the First Phone Call." Would you give me the liberty to read it? It's about 1 minute, Leah.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Okay. So it all begins with the first phone call, or you could say it all begins with the first contact. Increasing representation in clinical trials begins with the first human to human encounter. The website can be easy to navigate. The Instagram post can be dynamic and engaging. Once a participant arrives, the research site staff can be professional and caring. But the participant's first impression of the research site happens during the patient intake or patient recruiter call. During my 26-year tenure as dental director for First Health of the Carolinas, where the dental program's mission is to provide comprehensive dental care to underserved children, I quickly learned that excellent customer service and patient satisfaction starts with the first phone call. I used to ask my staff, and I really did ask them this, can the parent hear the smile in your voice? If potential clinical trial participants are not treated warmly and with respect by the first encounter, it's likely they may not take the next step. Customer service is the same, whether it is in dentistry, medicine, or clinical research, and it all begins with the first phone call. So you can tell that's something I'm really passionate about.
Yes. And I
Um,
feel like that's a good like baseline business model on just everything. Not even just how you even present yourself, just like on a personal level. It really does. Your reputation walks in the room before you do.
I would agree. I would agree. I had two other small practical changes, which again, just like you're saying, they are part of an overall business model. These are things that are very, very obvious. The second one is that the research site or the dental office call people back who are interested or who want to make an appointment in a timely fashion. And I talked about SysGrip. They did a perceptions and insight study. They do it every 2 years and recently did one. And they found in their from their participants, from the people they surveyed, that one of the reasons that people don't participate is they don't get a call back when they give their information online or when they call about a study. In fact, it showed that 1 in 4 persons didn't participate because they either didn't get a call back or it took too long. And I know that's true because that actually happened to me. Um, yes, it
Oh,
actually happened to me. The third thing I would say is to refrain from prejudging whether a person is interested or not, because we go back to cultural humility. We may think that that person's not going to be interested because of the way they're dressed, of how far they had to travel. Maybe they speak a language other than English. Maybe they have an accent, but we really can't make assumptions. So I would say it all boils down to RESPECT, as Aretha Franklin says. I would never dare to sing it, but um, and I love quotes. So, and Maya
mhm.
Angelou says that people will forget what you say, they will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel.
Yes, yes. Well, that honestly was an amazing. I can say nothing after that, Dr. Sharon. Thank you. Thank you so much for teaching us and taking us back to school. And I honestly hope you all listening really just took that into account, that honest wealth of, not that gave me goosebumps, not even gonna lie to you. Thank you, thank you, thank
You're
you
welcome.
for sharing your wisdom and your experience and your heart with us today. Like you said, I can tell how passionate you are about what it is that you do, and also because what you do is so amazing. And thank you to everyone who joined us. Thank you to everyone who's going to be watching the playback. This is exactly why Coffees and Conversations exist. And I cannot leave us out and benedict us without playing hot seat real quick, Dr. Sharon. So I'm going to ask you a few questions, and just the first thing that comes to your mind, you just give me an answer, okay?
Okay.
All right, coffee or tea? All right, how do you take it after a long work day?
Tea, chamomile
Tea?
tea.
Okay, I'm a coffee drinker myself. I am an espresso girl. All right, one word you wish healthcare and research used more often when speaking to patients or participants.
Which word do I think they use more? They would
Which
use more.
word do you wish they would use more?
I understand. Two
Mm.
words.
Okay, I'm taking. I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna take it. What's one common myth about clinical research you'd love to permanently just clear up and erase?
That it's only used as a last resort.
That is true. That's true. Okay. And the same question, but about dentistry.
That there's a so what's the myth I like to erase?
Mm-hmm.
That it has to hurt because it doesn't have to hurt.
Everyone always think they gonna get, you gonna hurt them and he's gonna get a needle. That's not how it is.
And
Okay. If
people
you could
use the
sit,
saying, they'll say something like, "I wouldn't want to do that. That would be as bad as getting a root canal." Oh, for us
ooh,
dentists, we just don't like to hear that at all. We do not like to hear that at all because we spend our whole lives and careers trying to help people be relaxed. Uh,
oh, okay, okay, okay. And if you could sit every research coordinator down for 60 seconds, what's the one thing you want them to remember?
I actually would say thank you for what you do. I've had a chance as I'm new in the field to be able to talk to different clinical research coordinators, and they've allowed me to shadow them to ask them questions. So I would actually say thank you because I appreciate the wealth of knowledge and information that they've shared with me. So I'd say thank you. That's what I would say.
Aw. And to finish us off, finish this sentence. Trust in healthcare begins with.
Me.
Amen, amen, amen. Dr. Sharon, please tell everyone where they could find you. Maybe they might have questions or want more information.
So they can connect with me on LinkedIn. They can email me at drharrell1wayforward@gmail.com. Call me 910-621-5846. I think those are the three major ways.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And thank you once again for coming out, and also everyone for watching, and once again for the replay. As you all know, at Superior Clinical Research, we believe research should be done with communities, not to them. So today's conversation just reminds us how powerful that shift can be. And we hope that you join us for the next one. And until then, please keep asking questions. Please keep the conversation going. Please still strive to be informed. Bye, guys.
Thank you so much, Leah.
Thank you.